Hello everyone. As a lot of you may know, there's this little indie film series called Star Wars with a few casual and very normal fans. Unlike most people, I didn't grow up watching Star Wars. I might have seen a bit of a few of them as a kid, but didn't properly watch any until I was around 16 when I just binged the original trilogy. But that was a while ago, and I haven't seen any of the prequels or sequels, so I thought it'd be fun to go through them all and review them as a non-fan. No nostalgia, no rose-tinted glasses, just pure analysis of the film quality. And by the way, I'm watching all of these on Disney Plus in the US. I realize there are different versions, so just putting that out there. Starting off, of course, with A New Hope, and this one is a classic for a reason. It's totally revolutionary for the time and still holds up today. Fundamentally, this is a perfect action film. The plot and script are just very well formulated into a hero's journey. While archetypal, the characters are all entertaining, well written, and full of life. The world building and backstory are especially excellent. I like how they incorporate intergalactic politics too. Everything technical is also impressive. The set design especially brings the world to life in such an amazing way. I know they went back and edited some of the effects, but they still look great. I wish studios would use more practical effects for big blockbusters like this again. And the cherry on top is obviously the classic score by John Williams. It wouldn't be the same at all without it. This movie creates a whole universe that feels so real and puts a simple but great story into it. This is just filled with so much charm and heart, and every element works so well, it's a 10 out of 10. Next is The Empire Strikes Back. This is also a total banger. I immediately noticed the production value and budget are way higher and everything looks incredible. Amazing set design as always, and it continues to hold up almost 50 years later. And the score continues to be fantastic as well. The love story between Han and Leia is well done. It's a nice enemies to lovers kind of thing, and they have a lot of chemistry. C-3PO, Chewbacca, and R2-D2 continue to be wonderful comic relief also. Lando is a great addition as he adds to the moral grayness present in the story and complements Han well as he's another somewhat morally gray character. This expands on the politics of the world well too. I know a lot of people complain about Star Wars being too political, but I think part of what makes it so good is how it's about fighting authoritarianism and how the regime works pretty realistically. The inclusion of the Empire goon guys who are always trying to impress Vader and are also terrified of him is great because it adds layers to the villains. Obviously an incredible twist. I know their minds were blown when this first came out. The characters developed very well in this too. Luke learning how to use the Force, Han becoming less selfish, and Leia falling in love. It's simple, but it works, and the performances are great here, especially from Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford. Yoda's presence and dialogue are equal parts insightful and hilarious, and that really embodies what's so great about this. It can make you think, and it's so entertaining. As with the last Star Wars, it uses tropes and archetypes, but in such a human and wonderful way. Amazing movie, 10 out of 10. And lastly, Return of the Jedi. So this was not as good as the first two, unfortunately. It's not bad by any means, but it's by far the weakest link of the trilogy. I'll start with the visuals because they're pretty clearly worse than the first two, and I'm not sure why because you'd think this one would have the highest budget. The sets feel a lot less vast and impressive than in Empire specifically. It's also packed with poor green screens. A large portion of this movie takes place in just a regular forest that looks like it could be on Earth, which kind of ruins the space fantasy vibe of it, since the other sets feel way more immersive into their world. I don't think it's well directed either. It feels a lot more standard than the other two. Also, the acting in this film is a lot worse than the others. Mark Hamill was never that great, but he was especially not great in this. I think a big problem here is this is supposed to be a big grand finale, and it lacks the grand epic feeling and stakes needed. A lot of that is in the stuff I already mentioned, but it's also in the story structure. This is supposed to be the final face-off against the Empire, and so much of it is full of the characters facing B-level threats like Jabba and the Ewoks. A lot of the scenes toward the beginning feel like deleted scenes. I also think the Ewoks make for a poor villain around the middle because they're so unthreatening and cute that it just feels goofy when the plot is supposed to be getting more intense. Overall, this lacks the tight and pointed nature I think would be necessary for this film to have for most of the runtime. However, I have to say the actual ending and climax between the Emperor, Luke, and Vader is actually fantastic. The character dynamics in this film are still so good, and this is a great example. I love how the Emperor outranks Vader even though Vader is the main villain of the series. I also love that they don't just want to kill Luke, they want to turn him to the dark side. These choices give the story so much more depth and the characters so much more dimension than it would have if they just had a regular evil villain who wanted to kill the hero. I really can't stress how much I love the scenes where Vader decides to save Luke and where Luke removes Vader's mask. It's just such a bold choice to redeem the villain like this. Amazing. Obviously, I have very mixed feelings on this. For most of it, it's a flawed but fun action film, but I do think that ending makes it really special. 7 out of 10. I have to say, I'm really anticipating the prequels just for the discourse and so I can finally have an opinion because these are so controversial. People either love them or hate them, and I'm honestly pretty excited. Alright, Phantom Menace. So this baffled me and I'm not sure what to think, to be honest. Generally, I found a lot of this funny and it was entertaining. A criticism I've heard of the prequels before is that they're boring, but I found that to be completely untrue. I was never bored watching this. That's not to say it was a masterpiece though, it has some obvious glaring issues. The worst thing is definitely the acting. The older actors do fine, but the younger actors not so much. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were cool. I also like Jar Jar, but he got a little annoying after a while. I enjoyed the first half of this film more than the second. The plot is actually pretty good. I found it interesting and engaging. I like the Trade Federation stuff. The guys had really funny voices, though the humor resting so much on funny accents gets tiresome. The central story of these two Jedi Knights finding this random super talented slave kid is really compelling. The pod racing scenes are awesome, and I also like the lightsaber fight scenes, especially that three-way one at the end. However, the field battle looks like total shit. A lot of the CGI creatures are actually unpleasant to look at. The movie looks fine, but I think it's too bright. I like the darker aesthetic more. The effects are also fine for the time. This movie is alright, to be honest. There's some bad and good things about it. Basically where I'm at is I like it, but I don't think it's objectively good. Maybe 5 out of 10. Next is Attack of the Clones. This movie is actually pretty great looking. I dig the design of the city, it's very Blade Runner. Somehow Yoda looks uglier than the original trilogy though. I also think the direction is improved significantly and the scenes build up tension better than the first. There's a pretty significant tonal shift from the previous film in that it's a lot less comedic, but I think the quality of the comedy, whether you're laughing with it or at it, is a lot better. Now, I had basically the opposite problem as The Phantom Menace in that I liked the second half a lot more than the first half. Again, my main issue is the acting is awful. I really don't know what was going on here because these actors are good in other films, but the line delivery is actually so dry and boring. I don't even mind the dialogue that much, not that it's great, but it's just the way they say it that gets irritating. Anakin's arc here is actually pretty interesting on paper, and the stuff with his mom was pretty compelling. Every scene with him and Padme was so strange and uncomfortable. I think the thing about these prequels is no matter how bad the writing or acting is, I still kind of care about the characters and do feel the emotional beats. The score does a lot of the heavy lifting, but also I think a lot of this works in theory, but just didn't translate well into the actual film. Well, the first half is pretty dry. I genuinely think the last hour and basically all of the action scenes are great. There's the Toad's factory scene, which is super creative, and the arena fight and the lightsaber battle at the end are really engaging too. I also think I like the last hour because the actors are just doing stunts and not opening their mouths. This is also like a 5. Again, not a good movie by any objective metrics, but there's enough good stuff and also enough bad stuff that's ironically enjoyable that it's a fun experience to watch. And the last of the prequel trilogy, Revenge of the Sith. And this really surprised me because it was legitimately great. It still has some of the goofiness associated with the prequels, but this feels more like an actually competently made film. There are a lot of huge action set pieces in this that are a lot of fun to watch. Overall, the effects and visuals are good. It looks basically half animated, like this probably cost an insane amount. The The acting is also better. It seems like they're actually trying to act. The dialogue is improved too. There are a lot of iconic memes in this. But the main thing that makes this good is how it structures the plot. It revolves around Anakin's character arc of becoming evil, basically, and they make everything make sense for his character. There's a lot of interesting grayness and moral complexity in all of it, and it feels appropriately tragic. Don't hate me for this, but I think Anakin is one of the most interesting Star Wars characters, which says a lot because Hayden Christensen's performance isn't great, and they mostly rely on hype moments and aura over actual writing. But I really like how he's manipulated and turned to the dark side here. It's just very interesting and compelling. Back to the plot structure, it feels like every scene here ratchets up the tension and builds to the eventual climax in a way the other prequels and even Return of the Jedi don't. The characters have pretty clear motives that clash with each other in an engaging way, and everything feels consequential. It doesn't muddle itself with irrelevant details too much either. I also just like how it ends and sets up the original trilogy. I think they really nail the Shakespearean tragedy angle here too. I'd be lying if I said this wasn't carried by the amazing score to a huge degree, and it isn't perfect, but I did have a great time watching, and it did connect with me emotionally. 8 out of 10. I also saw Rogue One, and I'll include it with the prequel since it's technically a prequel. Now, there's a lot of good things to say about Rogue One, mainly the visuals are incredible. This is a gorgeous movie, the cinematography and all the visual effects are superb. Also, the ending is really excellent. There's a huge tonal difference between this one and everything I've seen before. It's a lot more gritty and serious and less goofy. It's not a space opera anymore, more like a standard sci-fi film. They don't completely nail this tonal difference though. There isn't as much heart, and for most of the runtime it feels like it's forcing the emotional stuff. It doesn't really feel like Star Wars, even to the point where when the soundtrack comes in, it just feels out of place. And the soundtrack is excellent, it's just not appropriate for this film. The humor and dialogue are pretty hit or miss too. The characters also feel a little stiff and undefined. Diego Luna was definitely my favorite here. I think he brings a lot of likability. I'm also watching Andor, and I have basically the same opinion on that. They just aren't efficiently setting up clear personalities and motives for the characters in the way they do in others. Obviously, I had problems with this, but I'd be lying if I said this wasn't fantastically made in terms of directing and visuals. I'll give it 6 out of 10. I'm a little burnt out on Star Wars at this point, but I have to remind myself that I'm not here for necessarily great movies. I'm here to take part in internet discourse 10 years too late. And what triggered better internet discourse than the Star Wars sequel series? First up, we have The Force Awakens, and I really enjoyed this. It's not anything revolutionary, and it has some flaws, but this is without a doubt a well-made and entertaining film. Like Rogue One, the visuals, cinematography, and effects are beautiful. This also has particularly strong directing, and best of all, I think the storytelling here is refreshingly great. This introduces a lot of new characters, and they're all introduced so well. Kylo Ren is appropriately mysterious and intimidating. Finn is shown as a stormtrooper trying to correct course on his life, but particularly Rey has a great intro. They use Show Don't Tell to just give us a sense of her daily life, which is great. And all of the new characters are interesting in their own ways, and the performances are wonderful. Now, while I like the new characters, I kind of feel like it was held back a bit by the older ones returning. It wasn't total dumb nostalgia bait or anything, but it just kind of felt like they weren't giving the new characters room to breathe. It just wasn't my favorite part. I also don't think the First Order was differentiated enough from the Empire. You're not really sure exactly what they believe. They're kind of vague and like the same as the original trilogy. The story beats are also very familiar. It is similar to A New Hope, obviously. While the dialogue here is mostly good, there are some kind of corny jokes in here. I wouldn't say bad, just kind of corny. Also, there are some modernizations done to the soundtrack that I really love. Rey's theme is super great, love that. It reminds me of Double Trouble from the Harry Potter 3 soundtrack, actually. After watching this, I think it's very dumb that they were calling Rey overpowered and a Mary Sue for defeating the villain. Like, yes, the protagonist defeats the villain. Shocking, I know. But yeah, I thought this was really enjoyable. I'll give it 7 out of 10. Like the prequels, I was really looking forward to The Last Jedi because people similarly also love it or hate it. And you know, off first watch, I see why, because it's like half good and half bad. It's very confused and messy and inconsistent, but there's some things I like a lot in there. The cinematography is generally as good, but I don't think it's quite as pretty as Rogue One and The Force Awakens. I also didn't think the editing and directing were quite as crispy either, but still thought it was a well-made movie. I'll start with the bad. I think basically everything within the Resistance side, like between Leia's crew and Finn and Rose, was dumb. The character dynamics just weren't interesting. Leia almost dying in space was so wild and unrealistic, honestly served zero narrative purpose. Also, the conflict between Laura Dern's character and Poe was stupid and just based on miscommunication. They also give Finn much less to do here. Rose isn't particularly interesting either, they just try to make her quirky, I guess. But between Finn and Rose, there's like no dynamic. They pull a romance story out of nowhere. I was actually so surprised because they did not build that up at all. As for the good stuff, pretty much everything between Luke, Rey, and Kylo was excellent. They all have very rich and complex character dynamics. I love the inclusion of the surreal scenes with Rey and Kylo communicating. Luke also has a great arc here, and I love the scene where Yoda comes back. The relationship between Rey and Kylo is very compelling, and I love the scene in the throne room, though I think Snoke is a very boring character and not a good villain. The decision to make Rey's parents nobodies was pretty clearly the right one here also. The ending was quite good. The fight between Luke and the twist that he was basically a hologram was nice, as well as his subsequent death scene. The movie basically has one good plotline and one bad plotline, but I did have a good time watching it and think some interesting themes were explored. 6 out of 10. And finally, the last installment in the series, The Rise of Skywalker. So this wasn't good. This is basically like one of the prequels, but not funny. Actually, the acting's pretty good. They're actually trying to deliver these crappy lines. I'll give them credit for that. So really the main big huge issue here is the writing. All of the dialogue in this is terrible. It just feels so awkward and rushed. Then bringing back Palpatine just makes less than no sense. The funniest line in this is probably when Poe is briefing everyone and is like, somehow Palpatine returned. Like, this is Danny kinda forgot about the Iron Fleet level. Because Carrie Fisher died before this was shot, I guess they just used random footage they had of her, and all these scenes feel so awkward, like she's not in the same scene as them at all. She's just delivering these random generic lines. None of Rey's powers or the Force make any sense here. All of a sudden they can heal wounds. Literally all of Rey's powers are just whatever the plot needs. The whole reveal of Palpatine being her grandfather is stupid and butchers everything from The Last Jedi. It makes her whole background less interesting, because the idea of a powerful Jedi coming from nothing and being an orphan with shitty parents is just so much more compelling than whatever the hell that was. The other characters like Poe and Finn just have nothing interesting to do here at all except for getting random shoehorned love interests, when we all know they're soulmates. Basically, their whole side of the plot was just boring. The plot of this film makes zero sense, and others have picked it apart better than I ever will. The scene towards the end where Rey and Palpatine confront each other, as well as the scene where all the dead Jedi are talking to Rey, have to be the stupidest scenes though. It's so cliche it sounds like ChatGPT wrote it. What do I have nice to say? It is shot well and looks nice, which they get credit for. I also do like Kylo's arc and his dynamic with Rey. I think those last scenes between them are good. The intro looked cool, and I think it ends on a nice note. Very reminiscent of Return of the Jedi. It's kind of ruined though by Rey calling herself Skywalker for no reason. Also, if she's self-adopted into the Skywalker family, doesn't that make Kylo her adopted brother? This is like the Heart Part 6 of Star Wars movies. I feel like they can't have put this out seriously thinking it was good. They just had to put it out because they had already started something and had to finish it. This gets 4 out of 10. And I'm all done. This was mostly fun. I think Rise of Skywalker is the only truly bad film here. Here's my final ranking. If you stuck around, thanks so much, and make sure to like and subscribe, and you can also find me on Letterboxd. Bye bye.